When my aunt told me I didn't have what it takes to join the family business, I stayed quiet. She laughed, the rest of the family chuckled, and I felt that familiar sting rise in my chest. But what she didn't know was that her words wouldn't break me, they would become the fuel for a revenge she never saw coming. I'm Mia, 29 years old, and the family business has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My father built it from scratch, just a single bakery on a street corner, with the smell of fresh bread spilling out into the neighborhood every morning. He believed in hard work, kindness, and never cutting corners. To him, baking wasn't just a way to make money, it was a way to bring people together. Some of my earliest memories are of standing on a stool in the kitchen, covered in flour, helping my dad knead dough while he whistled old songs. He used to say, "Mia, one day all of this will be yours, not because you're my daughter, but because you have the heart for it." Those words carried me through so many tough years. When my dad passed away unexpectedly 2 years ago, my whole world shifted. The grief was heavy, but I thought I could honor him by carrying on his legacy. I believed I'd step into the role he had prepared me for. But that dream came crashing down when my Aunt Marjorie took over. At first, I told myself it made sense. She was his older sister and she'd been involved in the business here and there. She had more experience running things, or so I thought. I figured she'd guide me, maybe mentor me. I wanted to trust her. But it didn't take long for me to see that her intentions weren't noble. The first time it became clear was during a board meeting. I had spent days preparing a presentation on how we could expand the bakery's online presence. I was nervous but hopeful. When I finished, my aunt leaned back, tilted her head, and said, "That's cute, Mia. But this isn't some social media hobby. This is a business. Leave the real decisions to the adults." The room chuckled politely and I felt heat rushing to my face. I was 29, not a child. I had a degree in business management. I had ideas, vision, energy. But none of that mattered to her. In her eyes, I was just the little girl covered in flour, still playing pretend. After that, it became a pattern. Every suggestion I made was brushed aside. If I proposed a new flavor, she'd smirk and say, "We're not running a playground kitchen." If I mentioned expanding delivery services, she'd roll her eyes and mutter, "Do you even understand profit margins?" She never missed an opportunity to cut me down. It didn't stop in the boardroom either. At family gatherings, she turned my dreams into jokes. During Thanksgiving dinner, she raised her glass and said, "Here's to Mia, our family dreamer. Always dreaming, never doing." Everyone laughed. Some of them awkwardly, some of them genuinely. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile. What hurt most wasn't just her words, it was how the rest of the family let it happen. No one defended me. No one told her to stop. They just accepted her dominance, and I was left to sit there, silent, swallowing the humiliation. I started to question myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. I would lie awake at night, replaying every comment, every dismissive glance, until doubt gnawed at my confidence. But then I'd remember my dad's words, "You have the heart for it," and that voice inside me refused to die. The final straw came one evening when I overheard her speaking to another relative. I was walking past the office when I heard her say, "Mia, she doesn't belong here. She's soft, sentimental. She'd run this business into the ground within a year. Better she sticks to playing helper while the grown UPS handle the real work." My chest tightened as I pressed myself against the wall, listening. I wanted to burst in and confront her, but my legs felt like lead. That moment broke something inside me. Not because of her words, I'd heard worse, but because of the way she believed them so fully, as if my father's faith in me had been nothing more than a foolish mistake. Later that night, I drove to one of the bakeries. The windows were glowing warmly, customers carrying boxes of pastries out with smiles on their faces. I stood there on the sidewalk, breathing in the familiar smell of cinnamon and bread. Tears welled in my eyes as I thought about how much my father had sacrificed to build this. And here I was, his daughter, being told I wasn't good enough to inherit it. In that moment, grief mixed with anger in my chest. My aunt thought she could humiliate me into silence, that she could erase my place in the family legacy. But standing there, I realized something: if she wouldn't let me in, then I'd find my own way. She believed I was weak. She believed she had won. But what she didn't know was that she had lit a fire in me, one that would burn brighter than any insult she could throw. That night, I made myself a promise. I would no longer wait for her approval. I would no longer beg for scraps of acknowledgement. I would carve my own path, prove my worth, and when the time came, I'd make sure she regretted ever underestimating me. And with that vow burning in my heart, the first sparks of my plan began to take shape. I didn't sleep much after that night outside the bakery. My mind spun like a wheel, torn between despair and determination. Every cruel word my aunt had thrown at me replayed in my head like a broken record. For days, I carried her voice around like an unwanted shadow, soft, sentimental, not good enough. At first, I drowned in it. I avoided family dinners, skipped meetings at the bakery, and made excuses whenever she called. I couldn't stomach the smirk she wore every time she saw me, like she'd already won a battle I hadn't even been allowed to fight. The worst part? The more I stayed away, the more her narrative became the truth. But life has a funny way of pushing you when you least expect it. One morning, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled on an old photo of my dad and me in the bakery kitchen. I must have been 6 years old, grinning wildly with flour dusting my nose, while Dad stood beside me holding up a lopsided loaf of bread I had made. Written in his handwriting on the back of the picture were the words "Mia's first masterpiece. The heart of the bakery lives in her." I clutched that photo to my chest and sobbed. In that moment, I felt my father's presence so vividly, as if he were whispering in my ear, reminding me that I was capable, that I belonged. That night, I opened my laptop and began sketching out ideas. If my aunt thought I was too soft to run the family business, then maybe it was time to build something of my own. Something bigger. Something that carried my father's spirit while proving her wrong in the loudest way possible. At first, it was just scattered thoughts, new flavors, modern branding, a bakery cafe concept that combined tradition with innovation. But soon, the ideas grew into a plan. I pored over business books, watched hours of tutorials, and even reached out to small business mentors online. I researched suppliers, compared rental spaces, and drafted budgets on sticky notes scattered all over my apartment. Still, the fear gnawed at me. I had some savings, but not nearly enough to launch a business from scratch. And I knew my aunt would do everything in her power to block me if she found out. But every time doubt crept in, I looked at that photo of my dad and whispered to myself, "The heart of the bakery lives in you." I started small. I rented a tiny commercial kitchen downtown and began experimenting. Late nights were spent perfecting recipes, tweaking flavors, and packaging treats. My hands were raw from kneading, my clothes smelled perpetually of sugar and yeast, and I lived on coffee and determination. It was exhausting, but it felt like freedom. The first time I tested my products was at a weekend farmer's market. I set up a modest stall with a handwritten sign that read, "Mia's Oven, Tradition with a Twist." My table wasn't fancy, just neat boxes of pastries and a big nervous smile, but to my surprise, people stopped. They tasted, and then, they came back for more. By noon, I was sold out. I'll never forget the moment one customer leaned in and said, "These remind me of the bakery on Main Street, but fresher, more exciting." My heart skipped. My father's legacy was alive in me, but with my own touch. Week by week, my stall grew more popular. Word spread, and soon I was taking online orders through a small website I had cobbled together. It was chaos, juggling recipes, deliveries, and customer service all by myself, but every late night and every sore muscle felt worth it. Meanwhile, my aunt remained oblivious. At family gatherings, she continued her little jabs. "So Mia, found a real job yet? Or are you still playing with flour?" She'd sneer, and everyone would laugh. I bit my tongue, hiding the fact that while she mocked me, I was slowly building a loyal customer base. But it wasn't just about proving her wrong anymore. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about revenge and started being about me reclaiming my own power. Every satisfied customer, every glowing review reminded me that I was capable. That I wasn't weak or sentimental, I was determined. Still, there were hard nights. Nights where orders piled higher than I could handle, nights where I stared at my dwindling bank account and wondered if I had been foolish to try. Nights where loneliness hit me hard, because unlike my aunt, I didn't have a whole board of employees at my disposal. But each time I doubted myself, I remembered her voice dismissing me in front of the family, that smug smirk she wore as she said I wasn't capable. And instead of breaking me, it became my fuel. The turning point came 6 months later. I had saved enough from my sales to finally lease a small storefront. The day I signed the papers, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. I stood in the empty space, staring at the bare walls, imagining the smell of fresh bread filling the air. I could see the little cafe tables, the display case brimming with pastries, the chalkboard menu on the wall. This wasn't just a bakery. This was my statement, my proof, my revenge. And deep down, I knew the day would come when my aunt would find out. When she'd see what I had built, and she'd finally realize the mistake she made in underestimating me. But for now, as I locked up that empty shop and stepped into the night, I allowed myself one small, satisfied smile. Because this was just the beginning and she had no idea what was coming. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted through the air as I unlocked the door to my bakery one bright Saturday morning. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the chalkboard sign outside that read Mia's Oven, baked with heart. The line was already forming before I even flipped the sign to open. Families, students, couples, they all waited, chatting excitedly about their favorite pastries. Inside, the display case glistened with croissants, fruit tarts, and breads that had taken me months to perfect. My cafe tables were full within minutes, the hum of laughter and clinking coffee cups wrapping around me like music. It had been just over a year since I started selling at farmers markets, and now, here I was running a full-fledged bakery that was not only surviving but thriving. Every week, sales grew. Reviews online glowed with words like innovative, delicious, and authentic. Customers weren't just buying my pastries, they were buying into a story. My story. And it wasn't long before my aunt found out. It started with whispers. Loyal customers of the family bakery, her bakery, began drifting over to mine. Some came out of curiosity, others because they'd heard about this new place that felt fresher, warmer, more personal. Soon, my aunt's sales began to dip. She blamed the economy at first, then new coffee chains opening nearby. But the truth was unavoidable, her customers were choosing me. The real confrontation came on a chilly autumn afternoon. My bakery was buzzing as usual when the bell above the door jingled, and in walked my aunt. Dressed impeccably as always, her lips pursed, her eyes darted around, taking in the packed tables, the smiling customers, the long line at the counter. I stood behind the register, wiping my hands on my apron. My heart raced, but I kept my face calm. This was at the moment I had been working toward without even realizing it. "Well," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the chatter, "so this is what you've been up to." Customers glanced up, curious. My staff exchanged nervous looks. But I smiled warmly, as if greeting any other customer. "Welcome to Mia's Oven. Can I get you something? The cinnamon twists are our best seller." Her jaw tightened. "Don't play coy with me. You've been stealing business from your own family, undercutting us. Do you have any idea the damage you're causing?" The room fell into a hush. All eyes were on us. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I stood tall. "Stealing?" I repeated. "No, Aunt Margaret. I'm building. You told me I wasn't good enough for the family business, remember? That I didn't belong. So I created something of my own. Customers come here because they want to, not because I forced them." Her cheeks flushed, a rare crack in her perfectly composed armor. "You're naive if you think this will last. Running a bakery isn't just about pretty pastries. It's about endurance, reputation, tradition, things you clearly don't understand." I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making sure it carried through the silence. Tradition doesn't mean shutting people out. It doesn't mean crushing someone's spirit. I may be sentimental, but that's exactly why this place works. Because people don't just want food, they want connection. They want to feel like they matter. The cafe erupted in quiet murmurs of agreement. A few customers even nodded toward me, their loyalty radiating in their eyes. My aunt's lips trembled as she searched for words, but for once, she found none. She turned sharply on her heel, muttering something under her breath, and stormed out. The bell jingled one last time as the door slammed shut behind her. I stood there, my chest heaving, my heart pounding, but an overwhelming sense of triumph surged through me. For years, she had tried to diminish me, to convince me that I wasn't enough. But now, in front of everyone, the truth had spoken louder than her pride ever could. The fallout was swift. Within months, her bakery struggled to stay afloat. More and more customers defected to mine, lured by the warmth, the care, the innovation she had dismissed as sentimental. She tried discount sales, flashy marketing, even a rebrand, but nothing worked. Her arrogance had blinded her to what people truly valued. Meanwhile, Mia's Oven expanded. I hired more staff, opened a second location, and even started supplying pastries to local coffee shops. The name grew beyond my small town. Articles were written about me, the underdog who turned rejection into success. At the next family gathering, my aunt sat quietly at the table, avoiding my gaze. For the first time in my life, she had nothing to say to me. But my cousins, my uncles, even my grandmother, they all beamed with pride when they spoke to me, praising what I had built. And as I looked around that table, I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my place, my worth, and proving to myself that I could do it. My aunt had tried to silence me, but instead, she had given me the fuel to rise higher than I ever imagined. As for my father's memory, I felt it every day. In the laughter of my customers, in the smell of fresh bread filling the air, in the satisfaction of knowing that I carried his legacy forward not by following someone else's rules, but by creating my own. I had become the competition my aunt never saw coming. And I had won. So, what about you? Have you ever been underestimated by someone in your family or told you weren't good enough? If so, how did you prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. And if this story resonates with you, please don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button for more revenge stories.